I just woke up one day and I was in love with you. That is the line everybody clipped, not the rest of the conversation. Not the fact that the two people in it were laughing, interrupting each other, letting chat steer the topic into the strangest possible direction. Just that one sentence. Then the caption writers got to work. Spell, voodoo, potion, trapped. And now the internet is treating a live stream joke like it came with a notarized affidavit. Because Blueface, Johnathan Porter, the rapper you know as Blueface, says he's suddenly in love with Nevaeh Akira, and people have decided the explanation cannot possibly be the obvious one. A public-facing couple is making public-facing content out of their relationship. No, it has to be soup. It has to be an altar. It has to be somebody's spirituality edited down into a horror movie thumbnail. Stay with us on this one. If this kind of paper trail reading belongs in your feed, tap in, subscribe, and keep notifications on, because the actual question is not whether somebody put a spell on Blueface. The question is why the internet needs that story to be true when the plain evidence is already sitting in front of us. And by the end, we're going to come back to the one detail nobody's really accounting for: what changes when the relationship itself becomes the show. Blueface and Nevaeh have been visibly public for months. Their relationship has played out through live streams, clips, reactions, announcements, chat debates, family commentary, and constant reposting. In February, the pair publicly shared a pregnancy reveal during a Twitch livestream. Reporting described Blueface reacting on camera to positive tests and celebrating the news in real time. That matters, because when a relationship is already being performed in real time, every joke has an audience. Every disagreement gets replay value. Every affectionate moment becomes a headline. And every weird sentence becomes a theory. One more piece of the paperwork before we go further, because it changes how the rest of this reads. Blueface household isn't a two-person operation. He shares two children, Javon and Journey, with his longtime on and off partner Jaden Alexis, whom he publicly proposed to with a large diamond ring in October 2023, per Vibe. He also shares a son, Chrisian Malone Jr., born September 3rd, 2023, with Chrisian Rock, per XXL. Nevaeh Akira, per Hot 97's reporting on the February 22nd Twitch reveal, is now carrying his fourth child. The stream where the pregnancy news broke wasn't a random Instagram live. It was a scheduled Twitch broadcast on a monetized platform in front of a paying audience. That geography is important. Every sentence Blueface has said about Nevaeh has been said in a house that already has 3 co-parents attached to it, a fiancé in one corner, a former partner in another, and a comment section that treats each of those women like she's still fighting for footage. The latest theory says Nevaeh practices witchcraft and somehow put Blueface under a love spell. That is not a fact established by a document, a court record, a verified confession, or any reliable evidence of wrongdoing. What we actually have is a collection of livestream moments, Blueface joking about voodoo and food, Nevaeh discussing prayer, protection, spiritual beliefs, and a posted altar, chat members throwing questions at both of them, and third parties turning those clips into a much larger story. That's the file. Everything beyond that is interpretation. And honestly, the interpretation is doing laps around the evidence. A public clip circulating this week shows Blueface playing into the running joke that Nevaeh somehow changed him. Another shows him calling her his girlfriend and talking about being done with certain old habits. A separate post dated July 16th showed the pair participating in a maternity photo shoot. Then place the next quote next to that one. On Complex's write-up of the Los Angeles County ruling, court records reflect that Judge Peter Hernandez granted a request in June 2026 to redirect Blueface, ASCAP, and BMI royalties to Jackilyn Martinez, the mother of Soulja Boy's child, to satisfy a $123,245 default defamation judgment entered in April 2025. Blueface, in his own social posts, had written, "Tell Soulja, get a DNA test, that's my child lil bro, I'm the daddy now, per." Yeah, that's a filing. Not a vibe. A signed order. A judge a docket, a redirection of income that ordinarily lands in an artist's bank account before it lands anywhere else. Then place the third one. The Rolling Stone ruling on the strip club judgment doesn't just show the number. It shows the itemization. Judge Jacob A. Reynolds, Nevada District Court summary judgment, dated October 21st, breaks the $13 million down, $12.6 million in lost revenue, $198,000 in lease payments, $84,000 in outstanding payroll, plus insurance, utilities, liquor, and trash services per Rolling Stone. Cold. That's the paper on the civil side. Then the fourth one. On the criminal side of the same shooting, Clark County District Court Judge Kathleen Delaney sentenced Blueface to up to 3 years of probation with a suspended 2 to 5 year prison sentence per vibe. The judge's own words from the bench. If you get caught doing that, you get brought back here on any kind of probation violation, especially anything involving weapon. I will not hesitate to put you in prison for a significant period of time. Delaney's conditions included abstaining from alcohol and drugs, staying off the Las Vegas Strip except for paid appearances, and impulse control counseling. Flat read. That is not a caption. That is a sentence on the record. And the fifth one. On the release timeline, Blueface confirmed on Instagram Live in early 2026 that he had been released from California prison after serving nearly 2 years per complex. The reentry as of the current news window is fresh. The relationship became public on the other side of that release. Silence. Those 5 filings sit on the desk. Nowhere on the desk is a ruling, a filing, a signed statement, or an on-camera confession that establishes any occult practice by Nevaeh Akira. That absence is not neutral. That absence is the receipt. So let's slow this all the way down. Because there are 2 versions of the story moving at once. Version 1 says, Blueface is under some kind of supernatural control. Version 2 says, 2 people in a messy, highly public relationship have found a language that keeps people watching, and the audience is filling in the rest. One of those versions has proof. The other has a thumbnail. And wait, let me pull the camera back for a second. The spell narrative didn't start because anyone produced evidence of a spell. It started because the phrase is already built for the internet. You can say relationship content and people scroll. You say voodoo in the soup, and suddenly everybody has an opinion, a reaction channel, a 10-minute clip, and a cousin who claims they saw the original live. That's not an investigation. That's a content supply chain. Now line the calendar up next to that supply chain, because the rhythm is louder than the spell beat. The Twitch pregnancy reveal lands February 22nd, 2026. Blueface public confirmation of release from prison lands right around the same window. His Instagram Live announcement, per the Complex report, arrives after his parole eligibility window opens in early 2026. So, the couple's biggest personal milestone drops within days of the biggest career milestone he'd had in almost 2 years, freedom. The spell arc, the soup jokes, the altar clips, the she changed me bits, accelerates in the months right after that reveal, not before it. That doesn't require anyone to plan anything. It just requires people to understand what happens when you're back on camera after 2 years away, and your first big headline is a pregnancy test. The next headline has to be bigger. And then the next one. You don't need a spell to explain that. You need a content schedule. The public material shows Blueface repeatedly making the joke himself. He asks if something was put in his food. He says he feels unusually attached. He exaggerates. Nevaeh pushes back, jokes back, or explains that she's talking about prayer and protection rather than harming anyone. That distinction is important, even when the comment section refuses to let it be. The word voodoo gets thrown around online like it means any spiritual practice people don't understand. It doesn't. Smithsonian Folklife describes voodoo as a monotheistic religion centered on a supreme spiritual entity, and it has been routinely flattened into superstition and horror cliches in popular culture. Anthropological work echoes that. In one published academic overview, Voodoo is described as an African-American religion organized around a pantheon, sanctuaries, priests, fraternities, and rituals honoring spiritual entities, none of which resembles the horror movie shorthand the internet keeps reaching for per peer-reviewed sources indexed by PubMed. So, when people see candles, jewelry, a ritual of protection, an altar, or somebody describing blessings, then immediately jump to she controls men with dark magic. They're not doing research. They are repeating the oldest lazy shortcut available. That doesn't mean viewers have to share Nevaeh's beliefs. It does mean they should stop pretending they've decoded them from 30-second clips. There's a difference. A big one. And the clips themselves keep telling on the people reposting them. In one stretch of public conversation, Nevaeh says she does not practice voodoo. In another, she describes spiritual protection, blessing her pregnancy, and being careful about who touches her belly. In another, the discussion gets loose, chat-driven, and full of broad language about good versus bad spiritual practices. That is not a clean theology lesson. It's a live stream. A live stream is not a deposition. A live stream is somebody talking too fast, reacting to comments, half-joking, revising themselves, using words loosely, and trying to hold an audience at the same time. The team can acknowledge that some of her phrasing gives people room to ask questions. It does, but questions are not proof. And if the case is she said something vague about blessings, so she must be secretly controlling a grown man, that case falls apart before it reaches the courthouse door. Because Blueface is not being presented as silent, absent, or unaware. He is in the clips. He is joking. He is riffing. He is participating in the bit. That is the first receipt, not the meme, the participation. Now, the next receipt is a little less funny. Blueface came back into public life after serving prison time, and the return itself was treated as an event. BET reported that he was released after a 2-year sentence and documented his own post-release social media activity. That context changes how people should read this entire relationship rollout. A person re-entering public life after a prolonged absence is not returning to a quiet room. They are returning to an audience that already has expectations, conflicts, old narratives, family dynamics, co-parenting history, fan camps, and a platform economy waiting for the next visible move. So, when Blueface appears on Live with Nevaeh, talks about being in love, calls her his girlfriend, jokes about changing, talks about food, asks chat questions, and lets the conversation get absurd, the more realistic read is not supernatural control. The more realistic read is that he knows exactly what is happening on camera. Look at the structure. One person says something outrageous. The other person reacts. Chat escalates it. A clip page pulls the funniest 15 seconds. The caption removes the laughter around it. Reaction accounts give it a title that already contains the conclusion. Then viewers debate the title instead of the footage. That's the whole machine. And no, that doesn't mean every moment is fake. That's not the claim. People can have real feelings and still turn those feelings into content. Relationships can be genuine and still be performed for an audience. Pregnancy can be real. Affection can be real. Anxiety can be real. The camera can also be real. All of it can coexist. Actually, hold up. This is where the story gets less mystical and more revealing. The weirdest thing isn't that Blueface jokes about being under a spell. The weirdest thing is how quickly the audience accepts that explanation over the possibility that a man with a long public record of turning his personal life into engagement bait might be turning his personal life into engagement bait. That should be the baseline. Blueface has been one of the most visibly documented personalities in rap-adjacent internet culture for years. His personal conflicts, relationships, legal issues, family exchanges, streams, music, and social posts have repeatedly moved through public platforms as content. And this predates Nevaeh by half a decade. Business Insider in 2021 laid out the origin story. Blueface Blue Girls Club, an OnlyFans-based reality series openly modeled on Oxygen's Bad Girls Club, is the platform that first turned his household into scheduled entertainment per Business Insider. Krisian Rock's early public exposure came through that same show. The template was set years before Nevaeh's altar became a thumbnail, Cameras first, boundaries second, audience third. That is a long-standing business practice. That is a paper trail. This isn't gossip invented out of nowhere. The financial and legal stakes around his public life have been documented for years. In 2023, a Nevada judge ordered more than $13 million in damages in a civil case involving the closure of Euphoric Gentlemen's Club, according to reporting on court records. More recently, reports said a judge ordered his ASCAP and BMI royalty income redirected to satisfy a defamation judgment owed to Jackilyn Martinez. Now, nobody should turn that into a claim about Nevaeh. These are Blueface's legal and financial circumstances, and they do not prove anything about her beliefs or intentions. But they do explain why attention is not some harmless side effect in this world. Attention is an asset. Attention is reach. Attention creates clips, streams, brand visibility, subscriber growth, donations, reposts, music curiosity, paid appearances, and a larger bargaining position in a culture where your name can be monetized 20 different ways before breakfast. That's the part people keep skipping. They see love spell and stop thinking. But the money trail doesn't disappear just because somebody put spooky music behind a clip. Notice the hidden mechanic underneath those two judgments, though. The $13 million Vegas civil ruling and the $123,245 defamation judgment share the same shape. Both entered by default. Judge Reynolds' Rolling Stone obtained ruling stated Blueface's failure to oppose the award request may be construed as an admission. Complex reported the same fact pattern in the Martinez case. She got a default judgment after Blueface apparently blew off the lawsuit per Complex. Two major financial hits, both attaching because the defendant did not show up. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern of engagement with paperwork. Whatever the couple's spiritual life looks like, the courthouse life has been governed by one repeated choice. Don't respond. Somebody in the comments is going to say that two things are unrelated. Fine. Then ignore them and just watch the pattern move. Because the pattern doesn't need permission, the public relationship has been generating a steady rhythm of moments. Pregnancy announcements, live stream Q&As, couple jokes, family reactions, relationship status reveals, and now spiritual speculation. A public video compilation described one recent stream as Blueface and Nevaeh fielding questions from chat while discussing their relationship and pregnancy. That doesn't establish any occult practice. It establishes the opposite of a hidden operation. Everything is happening in public. The alleged mystery is getting broadcast in HD. And here is the first point where the timeline starts looking a little different. If Nevaeh were trying to conceal some sinister private behavior, why would the supposed evidence arrive through publicly posted moments, live stream jokes, clips where Blueface is openly laughing, and conversations with thousands of viewers watching? The theory requires us to believe that the most secret part of the story is also the part everyone is live streaming. That's not impossible. People can be careless online, but it is not the most supported reading. The more supported reading is that the pair understands tension. They understand teasing. They understand that Blueface is in love is a headline. And they understand that Blueface thinks she put something in his soup is an even bigger one. That is not black magic. That is platform literacy. Now, somebody is going to say, okay, but what about the altar? Fair question. An altar is not one thing. Spiritual objects are not one thing. Candles, offerings, jewelry, prayer, protective rituals, and visual symbols appear across many religious and cultural traditions. The internet's habit of calling every unfamiliar practice witchcraft is not insight. It's a refusal to learn vocabulary before making accusations. Smithsonian Magazine has noted that Voodoo in Haiti has been misunderstood for centuries. That doesn't require anyone to endorse a practice they don't understand. It requires basic discipline. You can say, I saw an altar and I don't know what it means. You cannot honestly say, I saw an altar, therefore this person has proven she controls another adult's free will. Those are not neighboring claims. Those are miles apart, and the distance between them is where the engagement farms live. Zoom the visual lens in on one detail that keeps getting mentioned but rarely gets read carefully. reporting from a fan-run tracker on Facebook, noted that Nevaeh has been seen wearing what were described as elaks, sacred beads used across specific West African diasporic spiritual traditions, during the more chaotic stretches of her public appearances, per a repost by Blue Rock TTV. Elaks are not a voodoo doll. They are not a hex tool. In the traditions that use them, they function as protection objects tied to specific spiritual entities. A viewer doesn't have to endorse the practice to notice the difference between a sacred bead and the horror movie version of it that the thumbnail is selling. One is documented ritual clothing. The other is a caption written in 10 seconds by someone who has never opened an anthropology paper. The magnifier isn't the beads. The magnifier is the gap between what the beads are and what the edit says they are. Now switch lenses to the behavioral track. Look at Blueface language across 3 separate public windows: the Twitch pregnancy reveal, the summer 2026 livestream cycle, and the June 28th confrontation clip. The recurring tick isn't "I'm in love." The recurring tick is escalation then audience check. He makes a bold statement. He pauses. He looks at chat. He reads a comment out loud. He lets chat build the next line for him. In one widely shared June clip, he tells a pregnant Nevaeh to get out his house on stream per YouTube. That moment did not survive as a private disagreement. It became a title, a thumbnail, a reaction cycle, and a discourse arc because the confrontation happened where the camera lives. That is a behavior pattern. And behavior patterns are more predictive than jokes about soup. Now hit the business lens. In April 2025, Martinez was awarded that $123,245 default judgment per Complex's TMZ-sourced reporting. In June 2026, the redirect order lands. That's 14 months of a debt not getting paid. During that same window, the couple's public content increased in frequency. A Mercedes-Benz gift, a proposal-adjacent engagement to Jaden Alexis on public record, a pregnancy reveal, a maternity shoot, multiple live stream confrontations. The business magnifier here isn't the money coming in, it's the ratio of visible spending to visible debt. The Mercedes shows up on live. The court order does not. One more thing. The discourse around Nevaeh's pregnancy has become especially reckless. She has said, in public clips, that acts viewers mocked were tied to protecting her baby and responding to outside contact with her belly. Whether people agree with that practice is beside the point. Turning pregnancy-related protection rituals into a monster story is not a serious read. It is an easy one. And easy reads usually travel farther. That's the dry part of the paperwork. The public record, we can see, points to a relationship that is very active on live video, very interactive with audience commentary, and very aware of what people are saying. It does not point to evidence that a love spell occurred. One is visible. The other is viral fiction. Let's put the clips in order. First, Blueface publicly acknowledges Nevaeh as his girlfriend. Public posts and video clips show him making that point directly. Then, the couple continues appearing together on streams while their pregnancy remains part of the public conversation. Then, the two appear in more relationship-centered content, including a maternity photo shoot circulating publicly this week. Then, Blueface jokes about feeling different, being in love, and possibly having been put under something. Do you see what's missing? Evidence that the joke should be taken literally. The filing isn't there. The signed statement isn't there. The direct confession isn't there. The corroborating witness isn't there. The only thing there is a running gag that the audience has promoted into a diagnosis. That's a very different story. And honestly, it's a more interesting one. Because the real seam in this story is not does Nevaeh do witchcraft. The real seam is, why does Blueface audience keep reading every relationship moment as a trap instead of a choice? That question has history. Blueface public relationships have often been framed through conflict, competition, spectacle, shifting alliances, and outside commentary. The audience has been trained to expect a twist. So, when he says he's committed, people don't read commitment. They read manipulation. That training was earned. Complex's own timeline of the Krisian Rock era documents years of public volatility from OnlyFans reality show origins in 2020 through repeated on-camera altercations per complex. Hot New Hip Hop, meanwhile, tracked the parallel Jaden-Alexis arc, a 9-year on-and-off relationship that produced 2 children before the October 2023 proposal per Hot New Hip Hop. Between those 2 tracks, an entire generation of viewers learned to interpret every new Blueface girlfriend through the last one. That's not fair to Nevaeh. It also isn't going anywhere. When he says he's in love, people don't read affection. They read control. When he's softer on camera, people don't read a person possibly changing. They read possession. That doesn't mean he has suddenly become a perfect partner. It definitely doesn't mean a few cheerful clips rewrite anybody's history. But it does mean the audience may be more invested in the old version of him than they are in whatever version is showing up now. And that is a strange contract to put on somebody. You want the chaos, but you also want him punished for being chaotic. You want the reunion, but only if it comes with a betrayal. You want the love story, but only if you can call it a curse. That is where the voodoo framing becomes useful to the internet. It lets everyone avoid the more complicated possibility. People can make choices that confuse us without being controlled. Blueface himself has said, on camera, that he is changing, that he wants to be in a relationship, and that he is in love. Whether viewers believe the long-term durability of those statements is another question. But those are his words and his public conduct. You don't have to crown it. You don't have to trust it. You also don't get to erase his agency, because the storyline would be less entertaining without a spell. Now, let's look at the food clips, because that part has been played like it was evidence in a trial. Blueface remarks that Nevaeh has been making soupy meals. The comments start yelling potion. He jokes about noodle soup and stew. She reacts. The audience laughs. The clip spreads. That's it. That is the receipt. Not a toxicology report. Not a hidden ingredient. Not a confession. Soup. And this is why the whole thing has to be handled with a little discipline. The joke may be funny. The theory may be funny. The edit may be funny. But when people begin making claims that a woman is secretly drugging, spiritually manipulating, or controlling a man without evidence, the joke becomes an allegation. Those are different categories. The footage supports they played into a running bit. The footage does not support Nevaeh put something in his food. The comments can keep their fan fiction. We're keeping the line between a joke and a claim, because if we lose that line, every public woman with a candle, a prayer, a protective necklace, a spiritual tradition, or an unusual vocabulary gets one bad edit away from being accused of something dark. That is lazy content. And it's especially lazy because the actual content is right there. Blueface and Nevaeh are a highly watchable pair because the energy is unpredictable, chat is involved, and neither of them seems interested in making the stream easy to summarize. That's enough. You don't have to add demons to it. Now, the first rehook here is this. Blueface's own public behavior appears to be the engine, not the byproduct. Think about it. He doesn't merely tolerate the conversation. He returns to it. He repeats the jokes. He asks the questions. He keeps chat in the room. He gives the clips their usable lines. That's a choice. And once we recognize that the love spell theory gets weaker while the content design theory gets much stronger, the couple has a feedback loop. Blueface makes a statement. Nevaeh reacts. The audience turns it into a theory. The theory becomes a new question on the next live. The next live produces a new clip. The clip reactivates the theory. That loop does not need to be coordinated in some masterplan sense. It just needs 2 people who understand that the audience is watching and a public that rewards escalation. The algorithm will do the rest. And that brings us to the first real pivot. Until now, we've been talking about whether the claim is true. Now, we need to talk about why the claim is profitable. Not necessarily profitable in a direct, transactional way for any single person. There's no receipt proving someone sat down and said, let's manufacture a witchcraft rumor for views. We don't have that. So, we won't pretend we do. But the pattern is clear. Outrageous spiritual claims produce more reactions than ordinary relationship content. That's not a moral statement. That's how social platforms operate. Conflict beats calm. Suspicion beats context. A screaming caption beats a careful one. A person says, "I pray over my child." The clip says, "She admits magic." A person says, "I don't do voodoo." The caption says, "She finally confesses." A man jokes, "You put something on me." The title says, "Blueface exposes love spell." The edit tells the story before the viewer presses play. That is the framing war. One camp frames Nevaeh as dangerous, manipulative, and spiritually suspicious. Another frames Blueface as a changed man finally settling down. A third camp says the entire situation is a performance and neither side should be taken too seriously. The honest read is probably closest to the third one, with room for real emotion inside it. Look at how the coverage sorts itself. The BET write-up of his release opens with a rehabilitation angle, a rapper confirms he is out, and the framing invites the reader to consider what he does next, per BET. The Hot 97 pregnancy piece uses affirmative verbs, confirmed, shared, celebrated, per Hot 97. Compare that to reaction channel titles, pulling from the same footage, shocking confession, put a spell on me voodoo. Same footage, wildly different verbs. Legacy outlets emphasize the human milestone. The reaction ecosystem emphasized the horror movie angle. Neither is completely wrong to zoom in on what it chose. But viewers who only see the reaction channel titles are seeing an edit of an edit, and by the time it lands in their feed, the original document has been paraphrased 3 times through hands that get paid by outrage. Here is the introduced Steelman that keeps getting typed under every clip. But if it's really just performance, why did Blueface publicly say she casts a love spell? Nobody says that unless something is going on. That's the strongest version of the counterargument. Give it its full weight. He did say it. He said it repeatedly. He said it with his own mouth on his own stream. Now dismantle it using the receipts already on the desk. The same man who publicly said something about a spell also publicly said in social posts, "Tell Soulja, get a DNA test. That's my child, lil bro. I'm the daddy now," per Complex's court record write-up. That statement carried a $123,245 default judgment for defamation. It was not literally true. The court didn't treat it as literally true. Blueface has an established documented history of saying inflammatory things on public platforms that turn out to be strategic, provocative, or plainly false. Treating his soup and spell jokes as sworn testimony while ignoring his own history of on-camera exaggeration would be selective evidence handling. The same voice can't be a reliable narrator for one accusation and a hype man for another. Pick a lane. And pick a lane is the whole framing war. The comments want him to be a truth teller when he says something spooky about Nevaeh, and a liar when he says something inflammatory about anybody else. That is not analysis. That is casting. Because that is how public relationships work now. They aren't fully fake or fully private. They are hybrid objects. Real people, real consequences, real feelings, and real incentives all sharing one camera. You can see that dynamic in the pregnancy coverage. The announcement itself was a personal milestone, but it was also staged as a live reveal, with audience access built into the moment. No judgment in that. Plenty of people share their lives online. But once life becomes content starts reshaping life. That's the part the public usually misses. The live stream isn't simply recording the relationship. It is participating in the relationship. Chat is in the room. The comments are in the room. Former partners are in the room. Family is in the room. People who hate watch are in the room. People clipping every sentence are in the room. So, when Blueface says, "You put a love spell on me," he isn't only talking to Nevaeh. He's feeding a room full of people who already know exactly what to do with that phrase. And the room does not want nuance. The room wants a villain. Now let's magnify the one phrase that keeps getting buried. "I'm in love." That is the actual line that unsettles people. Not the joke about magic, the emotional declaration. Because Blueface has built a public image around instability, conflict, brashness, and unpredictability. A softer statement lands differently when it comes from somebody who has spent years being read as emotionally unavailable or impossible to pin down. So viewers need an explanation that protects the old story. If he is voluntarily in love, then maybe he has changed. If he is under a spell, then the old story survives. See the difference? The spell theory is not just about Nevaeh. It's also about preserving the audience's version of Blueface. It lets people say, that cannot be him. But it is him on camera. That's what makes it uncomfortable. A person can be inconsistent. A person can say one thing this month and another thing next month. A person can be sincere in a moment and still fail to live up to it later. Blueface public history gives people plenty of reasons to be cautious about grand declarations. That is fair. What is not fair is taking caution and turning it into a supernatural accusation against the woman standing next to him. There's a clean countercase here, so let's give it its full weight. The countercase says, Nevaeh has used language about protection, blessings, white magic, altars, and spiritual beliefs. She has appeared comfortable discussing ideas that many viewers don't understand. Blueface has repeatedly joked that she changed him. He has seemed unusually attached. People close to the situation have also made comments that fuel the speculation. That is the strongest possible version. And it still does not prove the claim. It proves there is an unusual online conversation around spirituality and a public relationship. That is all. The counter case has atmosphere. The actual case needs evidence. And the evidence keeps pointing back to performance, not possession. The repeated live stream appearances are evidence. The public relationship label is evidence. The pregnancy reveal is evidence. The mutual participation in the joke is evidence. The upload and reaction cycle is evidence. The rest is imagination doing cardio. Damn, that is really what this comes down to. A grown man with a microphone, a camera, an audience, and a long relationship with public spectacle says something exaggerated. The internet believes the exaggeration because it is more exciting than the truth. And the truth may be more uncomfortable. He might simply be choosing to be there. Now, this does not excuse every public decision Blueface has made. It does not mean the relationship will last. It does not mean Nevaeh is beyond criticism for anything she says publicly. It does not mean viewers must accept every spiritual claim without question. It means the criticism should match the evidence. If you think a public ritual or statement is confusing, say that. If you think the couple is leaning too hard into a volatile spectacle, say that. If you think Blueface commitment language should be judged by future behavior rather than a livestream promise, say that too. That's a real conversation. But She Bewitched Him is not analysis. It is an exit ramp away from analysis. And here's the receipt. Drop nobody wants to sit with. The most verifiable thing about this couple is not the alleged spell. It is the audience's role in manufacturing the spell narrative. The audience turns a gag into a charge. The clip accounts turn a question into a conclusion. The reaction ecosystem turns unfamiliar spirituality into a threat. Then everyone points at the smoke and acts like it came from nowhere. No, we watch the fire get built. A July 12th video headline alone framed Blueface's statement as a shocking confession about Nevaeh putting a spell on him. The underlying public material, however, is a joking live stream exchange, not a verified admission of coercion or harm. That gap between title and evidence is the whole case. The title says, confirmed. The footage says, content. One word changes everything. And that word is why the team is leaning hard in one direction here. The verdict is this. Blueface is not under a love spell based on anything publicly established. He is inside a relationship that has become a live stream format, and the format rewards the audience for mistaking performance for proof. That is the thesis. The spell theory is not the scandal. The spell theory is the packaging. The packaging lets people avoid more complicated conversations about agency, public intimacy, spiritual stereotyping, relationships after incarceration, financial pressure, platform incentives, and the fact that people often become different versions of themselves in public, or pretend to. Either way, only time can separate a sincere change from a temporary performance. Extend the defense with the callbacks. The February Twitch reveal isn't a spell. The $13 million Nevada ruling isn't a spell. The Elix aren't a spell. The redirected ASCAP and BMI royalties aren't a spell. The 9-year Jaden Alexis arc that produced a public proposal isn't a spell. The Krasian rock era that predates Nevaeh by years isn't a spell. The prison release isn't a spell. The maternity shoot on Instagram isn't a spell. What is on the desk is a life documented on livestream, in court filings, and in tabloid write-ups. A life that would be strange whether Nevaeh had ever picked up a set of sacred beads or not. A quieter jab, though. There is something almost tender in how badly the audience wants him to be innocent here. He can be inflammatory in a court filing, unreliable in a co-parenting dispute, and volatile on camera, and still get treated as a victim the moment his girlfriend lights a candle. That's not a small tell. A drier jab next to it. If a spell existed and it made Blueface loyal, monogamous, and financially responsible, the receipts would look different. The receipts do not look different. The same man is still on default judgments, still on probation conditions, still on a reentry timeline. If she was casting anything, she was aiming low. A cutting jab after that. The people loudest about protecting Blueface from a woman's spirituality are the same people who monetized his prison time as content and his co-parenting battles as timeline material. Concern arrived exactly when it stopped being profitable to leave him alone. An absurdist jab, closing the row. Somewhere in this discourse is a viewer who genuinely believes a rapper can survive a probation violation, a $13 million civil judgment, a defamation default, and 2 years of incarceration, but not a bowl of soup. Take that seriously for a moment. Then don't. The mainstream framing deserves a closer look, too. The BET write-up on his release treated the moment as a reentry story per BET. The Hot 97 coverage of the pregnancy framed it as a milestone per Hot 97. Complex's coverage of the royalty seizure framed it as a legal consequence per Complex. None of the legacy outlets that have covered this artist for years led with a spell. That is a data point. The witchcraft frame lives almost exclusively in the reaction economy, a downstream layer that does not carry the same editorial guardrails as the outlets that break the actual court news. The mainstream press has room to be wrong about a lot of things, but it is not wrong about which document exists and which document doesn't. That is why the next part matters. What happens next will likely be more public confirmation, not less. Blueface and Nevaeh are positioned to keep turning relationship moments into streamable moments because that is where the audience has already gathered. New milestones, family reactions, arguments, affirmations, and jokes will almost certainly get read as evidence for whichever theory viewers already prefer. The people who think she changed him will point to every affectionate clip. The people who think he is playing a role will point to every inconsistency. The people who think she has supernatural control will interpret every new joke as confirmation. And the two people at the center will keep having to decide whether the engagement is worth the mythology growing around them. Watch how that most likely scenario extends. Once the baby arrives, the reporting shows an estimated late summer 2026 delivery window. The content cadence is about to intensify, not slow down. The next 90 days will produce a nursery reveal, a name debate, a family blend reaction, and probably a Jaden Alexis response cycle. Don't be shocked when the spell narrative migrates from soup jokes to parenting jokes. The same audience that read a candle as witchcraft is going to read a lullaby as a chant. The next wave of speculation will treat every baby-related ritual, sleep prayers, baby blessing traditions, protective jewelry, as new evidence for an old theory. And the industry residue is quieter but real. Reaction channels that built subscriber bases on the Voodoo arc will need a next act, and the search terms don't cool down on their own. Expect a second wind of ultra-focused thumbnails timed to whatever the next family milestone becomes. Watch what happens when the next disagreement lands on camera. That will be the first real pressure test. Not a soup joke, not a chat comment, not a candle, a disagreement. If the relationship remains public through actual conflict, then viewers will get a clearer view of whether Blueface's statements about commitment are a new direction or just a good moment. If the couple handles tension without feeding the same chaos cycle, that will weaken the spell narrative because it will force people to see ordinary relationship work where they expected a supernatural plot. If it explodes, the internet will pretend it predicted everything. It will not have predicted anything. It will have simply been waiting for one of two common outcomes in a public relationship. That's an important difference. Extend the table flipper scenario a few more turns. If the disagreement lands and neither party clips it, that's a bigger story than any spell claim. Watch how the reaction ecosystem responds to silence. By the next major public window, expect a coordinated push to fill the vacuum. Leaked audio, unnamed sources, insider accounts on Instagram doing dramatic voiceover of screenshots. The next quarter will see at least one attempt to spin an absence of drama as its own kind of drama. And once that hits, the failure prediction is straightforward. Reaction accounts will not survive on a quiet couple. Some of them will pivot to the Jaden-Alexis lane. Some will pivot to a manufactured Nevaeh versus family arc. The ones that can't pivot at all will fold quietly, and their audiences will migrate to whoever fills the void. Don't be surprised if outside voices keep trying to pull Nevaeh into a larger story than the one she is actually telling. She has become a useful symbol for everyone who wants to debate Blueface's behavior, his past relationships, his family, his image, and what a changed version of him might look like. That is a lot to put on one person. It also means every spiritual reference will get treated as evidence, even when it is just a belief, a ritual, a metaphor, or a loose live stream answer. Somebody in the comments has to know whether the original altar post is still publicly archived in full, not the cropped repost, not the reaction edit, the actual original. Because until people are looking at primary material instead of captions, they are debating someone else's edit. And that's the broader residue here. 5 years from now, the weirdest part of this era might not be that public figures lived online. It might be how often the internet demanded a paranormal explanation for behavior it could not emotionally process. A man says he loves somebody. Must be a spell. A woman prays over her pregnancy. Must be sinister. A couple makes a joke. Must be evidence. A thumbnail says exposed. Must be settled. That is not how evidence works. Trace the 5-year aftershock out to its edges. By 2031, the Blueface Voodoo arc will not be studied as a spiritual story. It will be studied as a case file in platform-native narrative construction, the way a real couple, a real pregnancy, and a real belief system got processed through a reaction economy that needed a villain more than it needed a fact. Don't be shocked when a media studies paper cites this specific episode as an example. Once that hits, expect a wave of retrospective clips. The internet was wrong about Nevaeh. Here's why. Those clips will be produced by the same infrastructure that produced the original accusations. The failure prediction for that entire ecosystem is simple. The moment retrospective content becomes more profitable than accusation content, the loudest accusers will rebrand as the loudest correctors. Watch the usernames. Some of them will not change. The tone will. And by the next major cultural conversation about spiritual stereotyping in Black women's public lives, this episode will be one of the citations. The next phase looks like a fight over narrative ownership. Blueface may keep leaning into the joke because it creates immediate attention. Nevaeh may continue clarifying what she means when she talks about protection and spirituality. The audience may keep refusing the clarification because certainty is more entertaining than nuance. But the falsifiable prediction is simple. If the relationship stays visible through the next major public milestone without either party producing actual evidence of coercion or harm, the love spell theory will keep surviving only as a content lane, not as a credible claim. And if the relationship changes direction later, as relationships sometimes do, that still will not retroactively prove magic. It will prove that relationships change. The whole promise loop comes back here. What changes when the relationship becomes the show? Everything. The private joke becomes public evidence. The public audience becomes a third participant. The partner becomes a character. The belief becomes a headline. The uncertainty becomes a business model. And the person who is supposedly under a spell gets treated like he has no agency at all. That is the part we're not buying. Blueface may be in love. He may be performing love. He may be trying to become something different. He may change his mind tomorrow. All of that remains possible. But based on what's publicly available, nobody has produced a receipt that proves Nevaeh put anything on him. What they produced was a live stream. And then they put a story on top of it. If you caught a detail in the original footage that changes the paper trail, put it in the comments. If this read held up, show it some support, subscribe, and turn the bell on, because the next case will have to survive the same test. Not what the caption said, what the record actually shows.